The tunnel rats, the men who entered Vietnam's underground hell. Imagine standing in the middle of a quiet jungle. The air is thick with humidity. Insects buzz through the trees. Birds call somewhere overhead. Nothing seems unusual. Then, without warning, automatic gunfire erupts from every direction. You dive for cover. Your platoon fires back into the dense vegetation. Within minutes, the shooting stops. Your commander orders the squad forward. You charge through the jungle expecting to find enemy soldiers. But there is no one. No bodies. No footprints. No abandoned weapons. Nothing. It's as if the jungle itself fired at you. During the Vietnam War, this happened again and again. The enemy wasn't disappearing into the forest. They were disappearing beneath it. Hidden below the jungles of South Vietnam lay one of the most extraordinary military engineering projects in modern warfare. A vast underground world stretching for miles. A place where hospitals, kitchens, ammunition depots, command centers, and entire military units existed beneath the feet of American soldiers. To fight this invisible enemy, the United States created one of the most dangerous combat roles of the entire war. They became known as the Tunnel Rats. Their mission was simple. Enter the tunnels. Find the enemy. Come back alive. For many, only the first two happened. By the late 1960s, the Viet Cong had transformed large areas around Saigon into an underground fortress. The most famous was the Cu Chi tunnel system. What began as small defensive shelters during the struggle against French colonial forces gradually evolved into an enormous underground network. Some sections were only a few hundred yards long. Others connected villages miles apart. Together, the network extended for well over 100 miles. It was far more than a collection of tunnels. It was an underground city. Entire command headquarters operated below ground. Medical stations treated wounded fighters. Storage rooms held rice, weapons, and ammunition. Workshops repaired rifles. Meeting rooms hosted military planning sessions. Some tunnels reached 3 levels deep. If one section was bombed, another could still function. The deeper levels offered protection from artillery and aerial bombardment. Small ventilation shafts, carefully disguised as termite mounds or tree roots, allowed fresh air to circulate without revealing their locations. To an American patrol walking overhead, nothing appeared unusual. But only a few feet beneath the ground, dozens of armed fighters might be listening to every footstep. The jungle itself had become a fortress. The United States possessed overwhelming firepower. Heavy bombers flattened forests. Artillery pounded suspected enemy positions. Helicopters inserted troops into remote areas. Yet none of that mattered if the enemy simply disappeared underground. Bombs collapsed some tunnel entrances. But the networks were designed with multiple exits. Destroy one entrance, and fighters emerged somewhere else. Engineers tried flooding them. The tunnels often curved sharply or rose and fell in elevation, making flooding far less effective than expected. Smoke and gas were sometimes introduced into entrances, but many tunnel systems had enough ventilation or alternate passages to reduce their effectiveness. Eventually, commanders reached an uncomfortable conclusion. Machines could not clear the tunnels. Someone had to go inside. That job fell to a handful of volunteers. There was no formal tunnel rat school during the early years. Experience became the instructor. The ideal candidate was small. Many tunnels measured barely 2 feet wide. Large soldiers simply could not fit. Some volunteers were barely 5 feet 5 inches tall. Equipment had to remain minimal. A full-size rifle was useless. There wasn't enough room to shoulder it. Most tunnel rats carried a pistol, often an M19 11-chambered in .45 caliber. Some preferred smaller revolvers because they were lighter and easier to maneuver. A flashlight was essential. Without it, absolute darkness swallowed everything. But using the flashlight created another danger. The beam announced exactly where you were. If an enemy fighter waited ahead, he could aim directly toward the light. Some veterans learned to flash their lights only briefly. A quick look. Darkness again. Another quick look. Every movement became calculated. Every sound mattered. Even your breathing felt loud. The tunnels were designed to kill intruders. Some passages ended in dead ends. Others looped back toward hidden firing positions. False doors concealed hidden compartments. Booby traps appeared almost everywhere. Punji stakes were among the most infamous. Sharpened bamboo spikes waited beneath concealed covers. A careless step could drive multiple spikes through a soldier's legs or feet. Many were deliberately contaminated with soil or waste to increase the risk of severe infection. Tripwires triggered grenades. Hidden firing ports allowed defenders to shoot before disappearing through escape passages. Simple traps often proved the most effective. One misplaced hand. One careless step. One missed wire. That could end everything. And unlike battles fought in open fields, there was almost nowhere to dodge. Combat underground was unlike anything most soldiers had experienced. There were no front lines. No distant targets. No room for tactical maneuvers. Sometimes enemies encountered one another only a few feet apart. In complete darkness. The first indication might be breathing. Or the scrape of clothing against clay. Some tunnel rats described hearing movement just beyond the reach of their flashlight. Unsure whether it was another soldier, an animal, or an enemy waiting silently. Veterans later recalled moments when both sides froze, listening. Neither wanting to reveal their position. Neither willing to fire first. Because one gunshot inside the confined tunnels produced an overwhelming blast of sound. The flash temporarily destroyed night vision. Smoke lingered. Dust filled the air. The tunnel amplified every noise. The fight rarely lasted long. At such close distances, seconds determined survival. The tunnels weren't occupied only by soldiers. Scorpions hid inside cracks. Centipedes crawled through narrow passages. Bats sometimes burst unexpectedly from overhead chambers. Rats gave the tunnel rats their nickname long before the term became official. Many veterans also reported encountering snakes underground. Whether naturally present or intentionally placed varied from location to location. Either way, the possibility added another layer of tension. Every shadow looked alive. Every movement demanded attention. Even after hours underground, exhaustion couldn't overcome vigilance. Because relaxing, even briefly, might mean triggering the next trap. Perhaps the greatest enemy wasn't the Viet Cong. It was fear. Modern psychology tells us confinement dramatically increases stress hormones. Vision narrows. Heart rate rises. Decision-making deteriorates. Inside a tunnel, there was nowhere to escape those sensations. Some veterans later admitted they were terrified every single time they entered. Courage didn't mean the absence of fear. It meant crawling forward despite it. One former tunnel rat recalled that every tunnel entrance felt like climbing into his own grave. Another said the darkness seemed almost physical, pressing against his face. Several remembered constantly imagining unseen eyes watching them from somewhere ahead. They didn't know whether the next corner contained an empty storage room. Or someone waiting with a weapon. The work demanded incredible patience. Tunnel rats searched room after room. They collected documents. Captured maps. Recovered radios. Destroyed ammunition caches. Sometimes they emerged carrying valuable intelligence that helped commanders understand enemy operations across an entire region. Other times they found nothing at all. Hours underground. Only to discover abandoned chambers. Every mission carried enormous risk regardless of the outcome. There was never any guarantee that the next entrance wasn't heavily defended. As the war continued, both sides adapted. Tunnel systems became more sophisticated. American detection methods improved. New demolition techniques were developed. Specialized engineering units worked alongside tunnel rats. But despite advances in technology, no machine ever completely replaced the need for human beings underground. Someone still had to crawl through the darkness. Someone still had to make the decision to move around the next corner. When the Vietnam War finally ended, many tunnel rats returned home carrying wounds that couldn't be seen. Some struggled with nightmares for decades. Others found enclosed spaces unbearable. elevators, basements, crawl spaces, even MRI machines. Simple situations triggered memories of the tunnels. Many veterans spoke little about what they experienced. Their missions had been conducted in isolation. Often only a handful of people truly understood what those tunnels were like. The psychological burden remained long after the physical danger disappeared. Today, portions of the Siuchi tunnels have been preserved as historical sites. Visitors can walk through widened sections designed for tourists. Even these modified passages leave many people uncomfortable after only a few minutes. It's difficult to imagine crawling through the original tunnels. Armed. Alone. Knowing someone could be waiting around the next bend. The tunnel rats occupied one of the most dangerous roles of the Vietnam War. They fought in conditions unlike almost any other battlefield in modern history. No sunlight. No horizon. No easy escape. Only darkness. Only silence. Only the unknown. History often remembers wars through massive battles, aircraft, tanks, and explosions. But some of the war's most extraordinary acts of courage happened where almost nobody could see them. Beneath the jungle floor. Inside narrow passages carved by hand. Where every inch forward demanded absolute determination. For the tunnel rats, victory wasn't measured in miles gained or hills captured. Sometimes, victory meant something far simpler. Finding your way back to daylight. And taking one more breath beneath an open sky.